Thank you. So welcome to this meeting of the Adults Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Swinglehurst and I'm the chair of this committee. The meeting is being held virtually because of the continuing pandemic and the government's direction to work from home wherever possible. Although there is an absence of legislation authorising remote decision-making, we are still able to debate the issues in public and to make recommendations. So the agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. The council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and making a recording. To ensure that recording quality is maintained, please speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum. Please ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. As we're all virtual participants, can I request that we use the raise hand function within the system if anyone wishes to speak? So we have agenda item number 1, apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we've had apologies have been received from Councillor Harrington on behalf of the Independents for Herefordshire, as he's been unable to find a substitute for Councillor Selden.
Okay, thank you very much. Duly noted. And do we have any named substitutes? Apparently not. Okay, no. Thank you. Number 3, declarations of interest. Do any members wish to declare any Schedule 1, Schedule 2 or other interests in any agenda item? I'll take that as a no. Thank you. So the minutes of the meeting, which was held on the 1st of November 2021, are included in the agenda at pages 9 to 14 for approval. And I take it there are no objections and everyone is in favour. So we will record that the minutes are correct. Thank you. Agenda item number 5, questions from members of the public. There have been no questions received for this meeting. Number 6, questions from councillors. There have been no questions from councillors for this meeting. So on to the agenda item number 7, which is the 2022-23 budget setting, to seek the views of the Adults Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee on the budget proposals for 2022-23 as they relate to the remit of the committee. So this afternoon we're being asked to consider the budget proposals for 2022-23. I believe we have a presentation. So at this point, I will hand over to Andrew Lovegrove, our Chief Financial Officer, to introduce the item. Mr. Lovegrove.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Chair, I wasn't proposing that we went through the slides slide by slide, if that's okay. I sort of on the assumption that people have seen most of these slides before at an earlier meeting, open it up for questions and queries to make the best use of our time. Okay,
that's absolutely fine. The presentation pack was included within the agenda paper, so everyone should have had a chance to have a look at that. So we can crack straight on to the debate and any questions that we may have for Andrew Lovegrove, and whether there are any other questions both for Mr. Lovegrove and Mr. Smith, who I think is also present. So yeah, any members of the committee wish to make any comments at this point or have any questions at this point? Or shall I make a start? Oh, Councillor Gandhi, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I find this report really difficult to make the necessary comments on. I note in the report that was attached to the presentation that it says that as a scrutiny committee, we can recommend alternative spending proposals or strategy priorities. But the reason I find it difficult is this report is very similar to the report we received earlier in the workshop. There are some changes, but it's basically very similar. And there is a figure for the base budget. which is obviously a significant figure. But there is no breakdown of what that relates to. There's nothing to show us what the gross budget is. There's nothing to show us what the income is. There's nothing, therefore, to show us what the net budget is. And I thought that when I first read it, that perhaps this was the normal practice that was going to be the same throughout all of the scrutiny committees. So the general scrutiny meeting hasn't yet published theirs, or they hadn't when I last looked, but I went and looked at children's, and children's has got quite a significant breakdown of costs. So you have an opportunity to see where the money is being spent, and how much is being spent, and whether it's more or less than previously. We don't have that opportunity. We just have a base budget of many million. And so although I have I do have some questions about mitigation, realistic mitigation, and other things. I do think that from a scrutiny point of view, it's really, really difficult to scrutinise a budget if you don't know what the budget is actually being spent on. And so from that point of view, I can't really comment on much of this, because the savings were out. We discussed at the last meeting, and I don't think anybody, I certainly don't have an issue with the savings. The cost pressures are I think realistic, but within the actual budget itself, I can't say how much we're spending, and whether we're spending more on a particular area, and therefore I think perhaps we shouldn't, or less on a particular area, and I think perhaps we should spend more. So I don't know what other members' views are of when they saw this budget, but I just felt it didn't actually tell me what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gandy. Yes, I mean, I'm inclined to agree with you. I guess it's sort of, difficult to set the, the level of detail, but my expectation would have been that it would be consistent across the scrutiny committees, and it clearly isn't. And it is difficult, therefore, to make an assessment as to whether or not, for instance, we should be putting more or less into, prevention or supported independent living or whatever. So yeah, I don't know, Ms. Lovegrove, do you have any comment to make on that? Just that broad observation about the level of detail in the report.
Thank you, Chair. And that is a fair comment on there. And it is always a challenge to work out to what level of detail to provide for the committees in these presentations, because we could talk for hours about a lot of the detail, which is probably not the best use of your time. It's my specialist subject, I guess. I'd spent quite a lot of time on the budget. In terms of the breakdowns provided, your colleagues on the Children's Scrutiny Committee asked for the breakdown, which we're providing. I think there's a supplement that can be produced later today for them as well to provide more breakdown. So I'm very happy to provide that level of detail. I appreciate that's not helpful for the meeting here, but you may want to, in terms of your recommendations, look at asking for that further breakdown to be provided into the arrangements.
Thank you. I think that's helpful, and that's a learning point for this committee as well, that we need to request additional detail.
I understand that, but that you are providing more for children's, but actually the published agenda for children's already contains considerable detail about how the budget is spent. So you're actually, they're asking for even more detail. We've got no detail, and I've just never seen a budget for consultation by members which has had so little, if any, no detail about the base budget at all. I cannot, from looking at this, tell you where those millions are being spent in any particular area at all. I can only see where you're wanting to make some savings, and where you've got cost pressures. But I couldn't tell you for 1 minute how much you're spending on Talk Community. I can't tell you how much you're spending on anything else. It's just not there, and I therefore don't. I'm at a quandary as to why a budget was produced for children's scrutiny, which they still are not presumably satisfied with, which is completely different in the way it's been set out to the way that adults has been produced. And I will be interested to see how the general scrutiny one is produced as well, because it actually, it makes it it makes it impossible for us to actually fulfill our recommendations, our remit, which is to comment on alternative spending proposals, because we don't actually know what the spending proposals in the budget are.
Thank you, Councillor Gandy. Mr. Smith. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Council, for the question. Just to re-emphasise Mr. Lovegrove's point, actually, of course we can provide the further detail should that be required, and of course it's been requested on the call today, so we can do that. And just to reiterate that based on the slide deck in front of you, on the quarterly outturn reports and the forecast reports that are published each quarter, and of course there is one of those due in the next few weeks, the parameters and percentages of the breakdown of the budget are almost identical to those previous years that are published on a quarterly basis. But of course, included in this budget is the growth that is highlighted on the slide deck. So if you look, I mean, of course, I won't expect you to do this. We will provide this information. But if you look at the quarterly report that's published at the end of each quarter, and then you combine that with the growth and the savings and pressures within the slide deck today, that is the breakdown of the budget. So there's no major changes to the expenditure profile, but there are additional pressures and savings included in this slide deck. So that might help to explain that there's very little change other than those pressures and savings from the previous budget, which is as expected, because of course the adults and communities and wellbeing budget has been successfully delivered. So let's not change a winning formula, I guess, is my view. So that might help some clarity. I don't know, but that's certainly the way that it's been put forward, and that's why there isn't the detail that perhaps Councillor Gandy has requested. But of course, as Mr. Lovegrove says, no problem with providing that whatsoever, because it's readily available.
Thank you, Mr. Councillor Gandy. Do you want us to come back on that, or? I
mean, we are where we are.
Okay.
No? I mean, there's nothing we can do about that today. I will make the comments that I will make, which are fairly minor when we get to. I mean, I can make them now, but I can't comment really on the budget because I've not seen the details. And in fairness to myself, I wasn't involved this time last year on adults, so I haven't had the opportunity to look at the adults budget in detail before. And so I was expecting more than this, and I might be alone in that, but no, that's where we are. So if I can just mention two other things which are to do with the slides, which are really probably nothing to do with the budget, but it's all I can go with now. One is there is some comment in there which is positive, which says that we have had no further increases in working age council tax reduction claimants. And I just wonder whether that's the norm or whether Herefordshire Council is sort of fairly quite unique in that situation. That's the first one. Someone?
Does somebody want to take that up? Mr. Smith?
Chair, I think that's a question for the Section 151 officer. Mr. Lovegrove will respond to that, I assume.
Sorry, could you repeat the question? My system's cutting out, whether it's my end. So could the question be repeated? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. In the report that is attached to these slides, it states that there has been no further increases in in working age council tax reduction claimants, and I just wanted to know whether this was the norm across the country, or whether Herefordshire was fortunate and perhaps fairly unique in that situation.
Well, I can't comment with exact detail about other councils, but this is a good position for the council. When we set the budget a year ago, we were very concerned about further increases in claimants. I'm pleased to have to report that hasn't happened for Herefordshire. And as we know, that the council tax reduction scheme that council has adopted was a more generous scheme last year than we've had previously, so that has helped with that, and we had central government support on there. I'm happy to contact my fellow 151 officers to see whether that experience is being replicated across the country, but I'm not aware of that level of detail of the data at the moment.
I'd be grateful if you perhaps could.
I will do.
And I think it's good. It's either good or there are people who should be claiming who aren't. But and the other thing is on page 24, which is the page which wasn't in our workshop. It talks about mitigation measures that are being taken or will be taken if certain things aren't achieved. I just wanted to know how realistic those measures are of fulfilling what you would want to fulfill, and if you can't achieve those mitigation measures, what sort of costs are we looking at that we might entail?
Yeah, I'll take that question, Andrew, if that's okay.
Mr. Smith.
Councillor Gandy, I can confirm that the mitigation, the first item is around home first pay rates, and there is a paper in circulation for Cabinet member and Section 151 officer as we speak. So that will be implemented within a couple of days for this year, and we have actually agreed with the CCG that they will fund that. So the NHS are funding the home first pay increase from the Better Care Fund. So that's been agreed. Within the budget, you'll see that there are pressures of 4 million. Circa 2.5 million of that is for fee inflation proposals of around 6% for the provider markets. So again, that's included within this budget as mitigation, and hopefully will be funded if this budget is supported. And in terms of the workforce retention proposals, the workforce grant that we were awarded from central government only in December, proposals have already been worked up, consulted with provider markets, and are in the process of being sent into modern.gov as we speak for political consultation, and that will happen hopefully this afternoon, if not tomorrow. So I can confirm that all of those mitigations have not only been acted upon, but will be live, ready for the 1st of April. So we've taken all of those measures into consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Summers.
Thank you, Chair. This is for Paul. Apologies if I've missed anything in the report, but the All Ages Commission, it's a direction we're going in now with mental health. The budget for that, is it a parcel between adults and children, or is it a separate budget? Could you give me some explanations on it, please?
I can indeed, Councillor, and I can confirm that again, the paper and proposals for all age commissioning are in the final stages of being produced, and they will be circulated to Cabinet and Management Board in the next couple of weeks. I had a final iteration of that just before Christmas, so Mr. Archibald, the Service Director for All Age Commissioning, is just finishing that off. Within the budget proposals before you today and in the slide deck, you'll see there is a £115,000 request. That is for 4 additional quality assurance officers to bolster the children's commissioning function within the all age function, because when doing the diagnostic of all age commissioning, we discovered that there wasn't a quality assurance proposal within children and young people. I've discussed that with Darryl, the Director of Children's Services, and we've agreed that that does need to be there, and it will absolutely be cost neutral, because effectively, if we manage and quality assure contracts that are already in place, we will almost undoubtedly, that will be cost neutral. So those officers will pay for themselves time and time again. And that's based on the experience that we have in adults, where we have a very robust quality assurance and contract management department. So that's one of the measures that is already in the budget proposals in front of you today. The costing for all age commissioning is being delivered as we speak in line with the accountants. So we're working with Andrew's colleagues to finalise the costings on that. I don't believe it will be significantly different than the current resources base. There may be a difference of 100,000 perhaps, but on a sort of £2.5 million budget, we can, I'm sure, consume that within savings over the next 12 months. So I don't see this as a significant growth, because as part of the all age commissioning proposal, we have reconfigured some roles, deleted a couple of roles, and created a couple of new roles in the draft proposals. So I believe that will come forward very quickly, and I don't believe it will require significant investment. But of course, I'm absolutely confident that the move to all age commissioning is categorically the right thing to do for this council, and we can begin to replicate some of the successes that community and wellbeing and adults have had, and replicate that within children and young people services, particularly from a commissioning perspective, which I think is going to be welcome.
As you're aware, I'm all for the all ages commissioning, but I am concerned of costs, because mental health is on the increase, in whether we're in children or adults, quite frankly. We haven't put enough into in the past. I would expect more going in the future. In that case, this one is probably for Andrew Lovegrove. Can we really honestly see that it's not going to affect us that much with this going into the all ages commission? I have my doubts that 100,000, 150,000 is going to take care of the issue that we have with it, because it is very broad, and I think we need as early as possible some figures on it, please. Thank you.
Okay, I know in terms of, is that enough money? I suspect we could argue that it's not, and there could be more money put into this area. This is an area that the funding is very complex, so the council puts money in, but we have the wider health system as well that is probably better funded for these type of issues than we are. So I don't think I give a definitive black and white answer to whether it's enough or not. I know it's in the context of having set quite a challenging budget for all of the services the council has to deliver. So, and you may want to, as a recommendation of the committee, to ask for further information, to have a closer look at that. But in terms of what we've got today, there is a balanced budget.
Thank you, Mr. Lovegrove. Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. While we're hearing a bit about the new bids, I'd appreciate hearing a little bit more about the independent living service. I'm glad to hear that all ages commissioning will be cost neutral, and obviously I'm particularly enthusiastic about any bids that may help to reduce outgoings or have multiplier effects. And also I would appreciate knowing in the savings whether the demand management may be that we raise our threshold, or whether we're fairly confident we can leave our threshold as it is and use our measures we've been using in order to deliver those. Thank you.
I'll respond to that, Councillor. Thank you very much, Councillor Marsh, for the question. I can confirm that the independent living service has been subject to an internal review. We've used the project management resource that's available to us via the corporate centre, and that's been heavily supported by Verto, and we've carried out an extensive and detailed review of the service. One of the difficulties, of course, that the independent living service, along with many others in the country, have suffered over the last 12 to 18 months is a delay in disabled facilities grants being awarded. And so we felt that a review of that service was due. We've undertaken that as a team in conjunction with the officers, including the occupational therapists, qualified OTs, and also Lee Davies, who heads that service up. The proposals that we put forward are fairly modest. They do include an additional, we've already taken account of an additional contribution from the Disabled Facilities Grant, which is available to us via the Better Care Fund. So we're using that money slightly more wisely than we did previously. And I don't have the figures to hand, but I was just trying to find the slide deck that was attributable to the MTFS meeting in October. But the iOS advancement, off the top of my head, was somewhere in the region of a growth of around 25 to 30% additional DFG assessments and successful assessments. So the investment in that service, which I believe is overdue, and the service has been in review for a while, will now begin to come to fruition. And in fact, the team is really keen to get moving with that redesign to mobilise it. And it will increase the productivity of DFG assessments and also target resources in the area of reducing waiting times for customers and individuals who require these services, because of course the experience of the individuals who require a DFG or an independent service review is the key to that delivery of that service. So that's absolutely where we've moved the resources to. So there's more frontline, and individuals and citizens and residents of Herefordshire will see a more visible service that targets them as individuals to get a successful outcome for them quicker than they have previously. It's a modest investment, and again, I believe strongly that it will pay dividends in terms of the long-term aspirations of the council.
Thank you. And the second question, which is page 27, was really whether the demand management that will provide quite a hefty chunk of the savings was to do with reducing what we offer or some other ingenious method that your team have come up with.
Interesting question, Councillor Marsh. And demand management is a bit of a bland term, which of course is used in many other industries outside of the public sector, and sometimes does lead to the connotation of, oh, is that a reduction in service? But actually, if you look at the graphs associated with the slide deck that are in front of you today, you'll see the demand management profile that we've delivered as a council over the last 3 or 4 years and continued into this year. And it's something that we should be very proud of as a council. Demand has reduced, but outcomes have increased, and people's experiences are better than they were 3 or 4 years ago, because without addressing demand management, we would quickly run out of resources. And as a council, Herefordshire would be in a similar position to many other councils in the UK and England, where the adult social care and community and wellbeing budget is in deficit. Of course, we've not been in deficit for a number of years. We're not going to be in deficit this year. And I believe strongly that we won't be in deficit next year. This budget is balanced, as Andrew suggested. It has been based on science, extensive consultation with me as the acting director and Councillor Crockett as the portfolio holder, and of course the other cabinet members. And I'm strongly of the opinion that we will balance that budget again next year. And the demand management piece is interesting because we have talk community, which many councils don't have, and certainly don't have it to the extent and the success that we have as Herefordshire. We have strengths-based approaches, and again, many councils dabble with strengths-based approaches, but don't have them embedded in business as usual as we do. And so we immediately look to people to see what can you achieve and do, rather than what cannot you do. And that's a very basic argument and a basic discussion, but it leads to better outcomes for people. We all know that if we achieve the maximum independence we can as individuals, and only the maximum, not beyond, that hopefully that's fulfilling for us, delivers good outcomes for us and our families. And demand management is embedded within that. So it isn't a case of cutting any services. And in fact, as an acting director of adults and communities, I wouldn't be supportive of cutting services, because I don't believe this is the time to do that. This is about managing our resources well, creatively ensuring that we use talk community and community assets, work with people to create their independence and maximise what they can achieve as individuals, working with our NHS partners, because again, there's a huge piece of demand management that links into what we do with the NHS. We have to be collaborative, we have to be integrated, and we then have to deliver outcomes that are good for people. So I'm passionately in favour of this particular proposal, Councillor Marsh. We've delivered an enormous amount of savings in the last few years based on demand management. I think we can go further. I'm confident that it will deliver good, if not better, outcomes for people than we deliver currently, but with less resources, which is, of course, the solution that we need in this difficult economic environment.
Yeah. Well, if it was possible just to have a follow-up, I was a bit sad to see in the very detailed consultation report we received that dissatisfaction with adults was up, but on a really vanishingly small sample size. And am I right that you have got a sort of robust feedback from your users, which I assume would be more solidly based and up to date than possibly that?
If you wish,
slightly
Councillor
random.
Marsh, absolutely, Councillor Marsh, you and I and maybe Councillor Crocky could have a discussion about that specific issue outside of the scrutiny meeting.
Sure.
I'm very confident that satisfaction levels are strong. I received multiple letters of thanks from people that we support. Of course, we have complaints also, and that's healthy. But we absolutely do receive very positive feedback from both our NHS colleagues and from people that we support within the services. And long may that continue. So yeah, very happy to have a conversation about that, Councillor Marsh.
Great, thank you.
I also, if I may add, given that consultation is within the papers for this meeting, and it certainly was something that piqued my interest, that it was the largest drop in satisfaction, 28 percentage points, and the largest rise in dissatisfaction, that any further more detailed, granular information that you might have about the levels of satisfaction and dissatisfaction with the service could be shared with the scrutiny committee more widely. And I think that would be appreciated, so that we have, we're satisfied that this is not an issue, but simply a reflection of a very small sample group, and that you need to look at this more widely, if that would be possible. Mr. Smith, I think we'd be grateful to see that information.
Very happy to do that, Councillor Chair. Absolutely no problem at all.
Terrific, thank you. Councillor Tillett.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just preface my comments with the fact that I am aware, obviously, that I was not able to make the workshop before Christmas. And although I've tried to catch up on what I've missed, I may possibly be slightly going over old ground, in which case I hope you'll humour me. But I would appreciate some clarity on page 30, the holding back demographic changes. Unless I've missed something, there seems to be a slight discrepancy, because the graphic and the text refer to a slightly different number. One is 300 and one is 360 recipients that we have, I quote, removed. Could you just clarify which is the correct number, and how have we removed these recipients, please?
Who wants to take that? Mr. Smith?
I'll take that question. I'm just going to have a look at that graph that Councillor Tillett has referred to. Won't be a second. Honest answer, Councillor Tillett, it's a graph I inherited, and I'm not sure is the honest answer. So if you allow me, and if I may, I'll come back with a response to the number. I'm looking for the word removed.
Reduced? I'm not sure. I haven't got it in front of me at the moment. I wrote down removed, but certainly there are 300 or 360 recipients who aren't there that we would otherwise have expected to have been there.
Yes, I don't think removed is the correct term, because we certainly wouldn't remove anybody from the ledger or from the rota or register if they are entitled to a service under the Care Act, of course. Reduced is a reasonable term, and of course demand management and talk community and strengths-based approaches is all about that, because of course ultimately there would have been a number of people previously without strengths-based approaches and talk community who may well have entered the service quite unnecessarily, and of course we now undertake a very detailed assessment. We find and triage opportunities for people to be supported outside of the formal care system, which I believe strongly is to their advantage. Nobody wants to receive care because we all want to remain independent, hopefully. So providing care to somebody who doesn't actually require it to some extent, and who could have their needs met in another way, is very detrimental to their health and well-being. I'm sure we've all read the research that people staying in hospital beds for longer than they need to leads to a degradation in their ability to function outside of that hospital bed. So we absolutely are using strengths-based and talk community to ensure that we only provide services to people that require those services, meet them under the Care Act. And that will reduce the numbers of people that we provide services to. Herefordshire is also an unusual demographic in that around 60, if not 65% of people that require care services, and of course that's often a personal decision, are self-funders. So some people have left the service because they are self-funders. Discharge to assess will support that, because of course people make their own choices, and in Herefordshire they're in a very fortunate position. There is a very healthy self-funding care market which people access, and often people would prefer that than accessing services from the council, because under the laws of the Care Act they're above the capital threshold or they don't meet the criteria. So it's certainly not about not providing services that are due and we are obligated to provide. It is simply about applying the Care Act, strengths-based approaches, and hopefully talk community and community resilience to people in a more productive way. And that has led to the reducing demand and the curve in that over the last few years. So I'll apologise for the 300, 360 debacle. I don't know the answer to that question off the top of my head, but I will find that out for you. But certainly the word removed, I don't think is the right term, because we would never remove somebody from the service who was due a service. But of course, we do reduce people's services because under the Care Act, if you will reach a certain threshold of independence, the law quite rightly states that you should enjoy that independence. It's not for us to paternally provide services when people don't require them. So that does happen on a daily basis. It's part of normal business as usual that people come in and out of the service occasionally. So I hope that answers your question, Councillor.
Yes, thank you, Paul. It does. And if I could just have a second bite of the cherry, because I can see Councillor Marsh is queuing up for at least a third or fourth. But it's in a way, it's more of a general point, because as Councillor Gandhi made clear, we haven't got a breakdown, but much mention has been made of talk community, quite rightly. And I'm sure, like all other councillors, I am supporting actively all the talk communities in my hub, and currently I'm working to facilitate another hub within the ward. But my concern, particularly since I've got the ear of 3 cabinet members at the moment, my concern is, to put it crudely, we seem to be very good at setting up community hubs. Where we seem to be falling short, in my experience, is actually getting the community to engage with the hub. Dare one say, even being aware of what talk community means. I'm certainly aware of 2 hubs in my ward where, let's face it, in Hinton and Hunderton, the need must be pretty great for the sort of services that talk community are providing. But 2 of those hubs have yet to have had a single inquiry from anyone in the community. As I say, I don't believe it's because the need isn't there. It may be that advice and support is being provided elsewhere, but it's that engagement. And I would almost make a plea of, can we stop setting up more hubs and get the hubs that we've got engaged with their local communities? I don't pretend there's a simple answer on how to do this, but and I'm really not a betting man, but I probably would put money on the fact that if you went out and asked a couple of dozen average Herefordians, have you heard of talk community, let alone what does it mean and do, the majority of them would have no idea. So I just wonder if we can think about the budgetary aspect of talk community, perhaps more of it being skewed towards communication and engagement before we prioritise setting up any more hubs. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Tilley. And of course, I am aware of the hubs in your ward, and I've been to one of them, actually, the Hinton Centre, a couple of times. A fantastic facility, of course, which would exist whether talk community existed or not, because it's been there for a number of years, doing great work in the community. We'll take that feedback. It's disappointing that that's your view, but we absolutely will take that feedback back. We do spend a decent chunk of money on marketing, promotion, and awareness raising. Not hundreds of thousands, but certainly a decent amount of the budget. So we will work with that budget, and I'll talk to the service director for Talk Community about your feedback. We will begin. It's a difficult. One of the points you made about the traffic across the threshold is a really interesting point, because, of course, what we really want to do is we want to understand exactly how many people. What's the footfall in retail terms that we talk about? How many people are crossing the threshold, and how many people are using the hub actively, either virtually or physically, and that's really important. Of course, that's been very difficult during the pandemic, but it's still something that we've had the opportunity to do. The collection of that data is quite difficult, because when we set up the hubs, we are specifically saying to people who run them, this is not the council acting as big brother and offering you the opportunity to be an arm of the council. This is about you as the community, and you as individual community leaders offering a service and a support network that your community really needs. And of course, that will be based on demographics, geographics, and the cohort of people that we've worked with in that community. So we don't want to set up a sort of a accounting mechanism that then detracts from the service, but we do need some mechanism of collecting the data, and we have been grappling with that for a little while, actually. So we are looking at how we might do that. I'm sure that there is a mechanism, because, you know, if we can count how many people going to Tesco's, I'm sure we can count how many people going to a much more important community hub. So I'll talk to Amy about that, the service director for Talk Community. We do have a really robust programme of Talk Community hubs. We've got 32 now, I believe, and we will hit 50 by the end of March. And it would be difficult to put the brakes on that. And I'm not sure it's advisable, because I think that's a difficult message. But I also understand that as a ward member and as a member of scrutiny, numbers of hubs is important, but the impact of hubs is much more important. And of course, that's something that we need to begin to measure, and we will take that away as an action and begin to see how we might do that. And in addition to that, there are Talk Community coordinators in each of the primary care networks, and their primary responsibility is the promotion of hub access and to work with the people that run those hubs, to ensure that they are visible within the community and that people do access them. So I will talk to the team about that, because that feedback is slightly disappointing. Maybe just, maybe not, it's not the case in all wards, but if that's the case in your ward, that's your experience, and I'll take that back and we'll discuss that.
Exactly, Paul. It's not a view. It is merely feedback. Amy is already aware of it, because I met her at the Challenge Church Community back in the autumn, when they had yet to have an inquiry, and to the best of my knowledge that they still haven't had any inquiry. And this morning I was at the mobile hub, which operates out of St Martin's Church, and was at the Scout Hut here this morning, again, to the extent that they don't even switch the laptop on, because no one has ever asked for any help, advice or support. So I'm not pretending that you should put the brake on, but I've just, maybe, well, you've taken on board what I've said. Thanks very much.
Absolutely. And as somebody that's very acutely aware of council resources, a laptop that we spent money on that isn't being switched on is disappointing in itself. So we'll take that away. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Tillett. Councillor Marsh.
I'm very aware that I am happy to go in a queue, but as there aren't any other hands. I was sort of interested in our environmental impact thing on page 17, where basically the environmental impact that's just looked at is minimising waste and resources. And I feel we're missing a bit of a trick there, because the environment that we all live in is a massive determinant of our health. And we are very good now, I think, at the strengths-based sort of people side of it. I was interested in the consultation we did, that one of the things that came up in the question about climate change was the number of people who knew about or used Keep Herefordshire Warm, and that was very low. So I'm wondering if, in the same way that we use people's people's strengths, whether we are making the best use we can of noticing that someone is in a cold home and could be referred to keep Herefordshire warm, noticing if someone never appears to move from their home and might feel better if they went for a bit of a stroll, and some of those softer things that nevertheless have been shown to be very powerful improvements for health, and then might help with our demand management because, of course.
Councillor Marsh, you appear to have pre-read the commissioning strategy that's not published yet, because that's absolutely the right direction of travel, of course. Talk Community has been embedded now in the council for a couple of years and is becoming all age and council-wide in its approach. But the next phases of that is very much about how do we use our environment in a more creative way? How do we use, as a council, as a Directorate of Community and Wellbeing and as Talk Community, how do we encourage minimise of waste? How do we encourage environmental use? How do we encourage people into buses? How do we encourage people onto bikes, public transport, etc.? And how do we find the fuel poverty in areas of the county, which of course exists? And how do we find inactivity levels, which of course exist? So working closely with our colleagues in public health, the recent publication of the new JSNA, of course, is incredibly helpful to the Community and Wellbeing Directorate. And we are now working closely via the media of the Health and Wellbeing Board to combine those two areas together, so that Amy and the Director of Public Health are working in synergy with each other very closely, which they always have done, but perhaps on a more intensive basis, to ensure that into that next phase of Talk Community and strengths-based, that we start to move into that space of how can we help people with their fuel poverty. You'll be aware that this year we've launched a debt management service, completely free of charge, completely funded by Talk Community, and it's helped a number of people who are on that just about managing poverty line, and it's helping them access benefits, welfare, grants, etc. We're working closely with HVOS and the voluntary sector to ensure that the schemes that they run, quite legitimately outside of the council, we get onto the Talk Community website and make them visible to people. We're working closely with public health and our NHS colleagues so that NHS come into the space of it isn't just a social care or a council problem, it's a system issue, and the better that we support people with fuel poverty, poverty itself, economic inactivity, getting back into work, if they can, of course, more exercise using technology, we get into that space of getting people to be more well and their health and well-being is improved. And of course, that absolutely, as you rightly said, reduces demand on adult social care in the council, but to some extent is an even bigger prize for the NHS. So we're starting to move into that space of having that discussion via the integrated care system. The investment that the NHS are making via the Better Care Funding Home First is, I believe, the first major investment in a social care service that the NHS has made exclusively. We've always worked together, but this is the NHS saying, we will invest in a service that social care runs. I think that's a huge step forward. And the more people we can get in Home First as care workers, working on a sustainable rate per hour of wages that are above the levels that they've worked on before, they will create independence. They will get people well that have been discharged from hospital, and those people hopefully will re-enter the community without requiring ongoing services. And part of that is work with the healthy lifestyle trainers, work with the environmental aspects of the E&E Directorate, and very much the direction of a council in becoming one council and not acting independently as directorates, but working together closely, which is the new way that we work. I think will hugely advance that agenda. It's great for the health and well-being of people if the E&E Directorate produce a built environment that improves the health and well-being of people. That's great for me as a director and as an acting director, because people will be better and will have better well-being. I think previously we were in a little bit silo, and now I think that we're in a position where we're working really closely, and the built environment and the environmental aspects of the climate emergency are front and centre of what we do as a community and wellbeing directorate. So I hope that again answers your question, Councillor Marsh, and I can assure you that any proposal that comes across mine and Councillor Crockett's desk that doesn't include a genuine attempt to improve the environmental aspect, because every social care service can, is quickly asked to be rewritten and to be refreshed, because that's a fundamental bedrock of what we do. It's got to be good for the environment, it's got to be good for people, it's got to be technology driven, and it's got to deliver better outcomes for the same or less resources, because otherwise it's not an advancement.
Well, that's very exciting, and I yes, strongly support this one council approach, and I'm also delighted that the money services have had a chance to get going in what I fear will be a year when they will be strongly needed. So I'm also very excited that those are more visible than they were. Thank you.
Right, I'm going to have a go now. It would have been my approach really to triangulate with the relevant directorate plan and the health and wellbeing strategy, but both those documents are out of date, and also there's nothing really to triangulate with because of the lack of detail in the budget itself. So there's no way that I can say, right, this is the intention and here is the spend on that. However, the county delivery plan does contain some very useful sense of direction stuff, which is great, which would cover things like the wider determinants of health that you've just been discussing. So I won't go into that, but it does have things like recognising art and culture as contributing to well-being. So do we have is there some funding within the budget, a line somewhere that for contributing to art and culture within the county? There's also obviously an emphasis on strong local communities, which clearly we deliver through Talk Community, and again, I don't know quite how much of the spend is sitting with Talk Community, but is there an additional spend with other community organisations also delivering valuable services within their community in order to develop and support those services? So that's a couple of things just to start with. Have we got funding somewhere in the budget for art and culture is contributing to wellbeing and other community organisations other than Talk Community?
Thank you, Chair. Of course, you'll be aware, no doubt, that in the recent restructure that archives, museums and libraries have moved into the Community and Wellbeing Directorate. That's happened just over Christmas and is now going to start to begin in earnest. And of course, leisure centres. So there's a recognition from within the council that art and culture and those sorts of services and libraries and museums, etc., contribute hugely to people's health and wellbeing. Of course they do. Particularly in a rural county such as Herefordshire, the ability to access those services depends on the ability for them to be available to you, of course, and it's not as easy as just to jump on a tube train and go and see a museum, because we're in a rural county and we've got to aspire to them being accessible to the whole of the community, and that's definitely why those services were brought in to the Community and Wellbeing Directorate, which of course I'm heavily supportive of. As is Amy, because of course they come into the remit of Amy's service director remit, and you'll be aware of the very, very large capital programme that's just about to start, and has gone into the programme around £21 million for the enhancements to the libraries and the museums in Herefordshire. A fantastic opportunity as a project to transform our offer as a county around those two service areas. An enormous amount of money which we've been successful in bidding for, and of course at an early stage, but that's hopeful that project will become a reality fairly soon. And in fact, it was obviously in the papers in December to move forward with the design and build aspects of that. So there's a recognition that contributes heavily. Amy is already meeting with those organisations. The libraries, museums and archive staff have transferred into Community and Wellbeing. We had our first directorate call on, I want to say, the 17th of December, where myself and Amy chaired, and we welcomed those new members of staff into the directorate, because of course we see them as our colleagues, as we always did, but now they're colleagues within our directorate. And we recognise the huge contribution that those types of services can contribute to health and wellbeing. So it's an early stage, let's not pretend any different, but there's a recognition and a strategic move for that to move into that space. In terms of the the talk community approach around arts, culture and those sorts of services, we already commission HVOS. They have an annual grant where they become a facilitator for the third sector and for voluntary organisations who work across the whole of the patch. So we pay HVOS to be the overarching umbrella organisation for the third sector. It's something we used to do many years ago. We stopped doing, we reintroduced that as a contract 2 years ago, and very supportive of that as a directorate, because that allows us to then to take a view that we support, of course, the third sector and the voluntary sector. But again, it's like talk community, it's not top down. It's not the council dictating to those organisations what they can and can't do, because that's not our place to do so. And of course, the really good voluntary and third sector organisations, as I'm sure many councillors are involved with and supportive of, are fantastic at raising revenue and lottery funds and other funding. So where we can access revenue funding, the voluntary sector and third sector can often double, triple and quadruple that because of their ability to bid for outside monies, which we can't do. So there's an investment in the sector so that they can become as productive, and they don't have to worry about covering their overheads. They've got an office base, and they can generate a good third and sustainable third sector within Herefordshire. Some of that money will, of course, go into arts and culture and museums and libraries and those sorts of services and leisure. And of course, with the support of Mr. Lovegrove, you'll be aware that the COVID recovery grants that we were fortunate enough to receive over the last few months, almost all of those grants have gone into those areas. So leisure, culture, museums, etc. You know, the holiday activity fund has been invaluable to families, adult swimming lessons, free access to Halo leisure. All of those things have been fantastic for the community. And of course, additional exhibitions at the museums which are coming through. And of course, there's the medium-term aspiration around the Herefordshire Hoard, which I think will be an enormous piece of growth for Herefordshire, and will really bring visitors in and also bring a rich cultural experience to people within the community, because it's something that can only happen in Herefordshire, and it's Herefordshire at its heart. So it's a great piece of work, and I don't think there was anybody in the room who didn't say, well, this has got to come. The Herefordshire Hoard has to be delivered to Herefordshire. It would be a travesty for it to go elsewhere. So those sort of opportunities in the previous world, maybe 18 months ago, would have been discussed in isolation. But now we're having those discussions with community and wellbeing, E&E, children and young people, corporate centre, all in the room at the same time, all contributing to that. And a recognition that the built environment, the culture of an organisation, the culture of the county massively improves the well-being. I've certainly seen that in other parts of the country where I've worked, where an improvement to the built environment, an enhancement of the museums and libraries, and just a general, and I'll use the term heads up for the community to say, let's be proud and have some civic pride in what we do, massively improves health and well-being. And I think that's where we're moving towards as a council. And I think we've got some great opportunities to do so. I hope that answers your question. I apologise.
That's great. That sounds really, really positive. And I dare say we'll have more, that this will get amplified, because you say it's early days yet, but it's good to see it coming together so well. That's fantastic. The other thing was the use of technology to support home care and extend independent living, which is for this year as a stated aim. Is that you disappeared? Are you still there, Mr. Smith? Oh, come on, going. So I'd like to know a bit more about that within a budgetary context.
Apologies, Council. I tried to switch off my mic and switched off my camera.
Oh, okay.
Yes, within the budget that's put before you today, that in the capital programme there is always a technology fund, of course, and proposals are being worked up to use that technology fund progressively, and that's very imminent. I've got a meeting tomorrow actually to hopefully finalise those proposals. In terms of the use of technology within care services specifically, we are in the middle of a pilot called Just Checking and Just Roaming, which is a pilot with the learning disabilities cohort, working with a provider called Aspire, where we are working with families and people that we support with Aspire to, again, create more independence by using technology. That is a live trial that we are undertaking.
Would this be, it'd be reasonable to say that actually this is one of the tools of demand management technology?
Absolutely would. Yeah, absolutely.
To go back to the earlier question from Councillor Marsh. It's an example of how that can be.
As an example, if there are 3 individuals and people living in a property, in some instances in the past, we may have had 3 care workers also living in the property during the evening, just in case. And that's often not necessary. So you can, with demand management, you can, of course, perhaps potentially reduce that to 1. With technology, you can reduce it to almost 0, because technology allows us to monitor and to observe rather than to have somebody sitting there just in case. So that's one element of just roaming. In terms of the home care, you'll be aware that we've recently concluded our home care recommission exercise in November. Very successful project run by the council. Huge engagement with councillors, of course, throughout the process, which, of course, is absolutely something we support as commissioners. I can confirm that Herefordshire has mobilised and is now running the new contract, which at least 2 councils in the last 12 months haven't managed because of an unsustainable rate. And of course, I'm particularly proud of the rates that we pay in Herefordshire for those services. And within the budget for Home First, that is contained within this budget, it includes a budget for technology for Home First. So that's a scheduling system, a call monitoring system, and a call management system. So that's all within there. There is a proposal coming forward to Cabinet in February for many of the services that we provide as a council to transfer into Hoople. We've talked about this in previous scrutiny meetings and also previous Cabinet meetings. And we felt it was appropriate to get that move approved. And if that move is supported, then we will move with Hoople to begin to introduce the technology. The budget is there. The products exist. I've procured and commissioned them on many occasions previously, and we can move forward with that. As we speak, a provider portal, which allows the electronic exchange of documents between providers and the council, is already under mobilisation, but the next phase of that will be scheduling and call monitoring, which will become live certainly in the next 6 to 9 months.
And just to pick up on the sort of more general theme of alternative routes of provision, which I think sort of technology is one of those things, and linking into the consultation responses and concerns around support for older people to remain in their home, which I know is very dear to our heart, and it's what we perceive as being the best outcome by and large. The home share scheme. Have we ever really got traction with that? Because it's always seemed to me to be a real opportunity to meet the needs of somebody vulnerable within their own home, but also the needs of somebody who needs somewhere to live. Are we looking into that yet?
Yeah, Councillor Swingers, I believe you're referring to shared lives, which is
no.
Oh, sorry, which.
Home share. It's a similar. It's a kind of parallel scheme. It was also done. I think Kategi also did a version of it. So shared life would be sort of an adult with learning disability living within a home. Home share is somebody living with a vulnerable older person or somebody with vulnerabilities or needs in order to enable them to remain within their home. By way of being, another person around the place to sort of help out and meet low-level need.
It's not a service area that we've gone into in Herefordshire. We may have explored it in the past, not in my time, I don't believe, but of course it's got merits, absolutely, and it's successful in some parts of the country. It isn't something we've done, and it is something we could, of course, look at because there will be. It's
always struck me as being, a bit obvious when you've got a shortage of accommodation on the one hand, and vulnerable people living on their own on the other hand. If you join these two things together, and you can have a great deal of benefit, but somebody has to be the broker and it's something they do all over the place. I think it's Scandinavia, I think, started it, but it's.
Certainly very happy to do some additional research counsel into that area. It's not something we've done in Herefordshire, and if I'm being completely candid, it's not something that I've been massively involved with in other parts of the country either. But that doesn't mean it shouldn't be looked at. It absolutely should. And Scandinavia does tend to be quite groundbreaking in some of their approaches to these areas. So we certainly have a look at that. And I'm quite happy to commit to coming back to scrutiny maybe in 3 to 6 months with some ideas about how we might progress that and see whether
That would be very welcome. If you'd have a look at it, that would be really, really welcome. I'd love to know what you think of it. So the other thing was, the JSNA, which is the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment. For anyone watching this meeting unfamiliar with the acronyms of the local authority, the JSNA highlights as a priority the availability of data for self-funding cohort. How are we getting on with that? And do we have funding in this budget to improve that data set?
Thank you, Chair. We already have a commitment, or we have an obligation actually, to understand the self-funding market outside of the council. And we do to some extent, but not to the extent that I feel we should. Within the JSNA, of course, it provides some rich data and up to date. Of course, it's been refreshed recently. We have invested heavily in the business intelligence team over the last couple of months. And there is a new business analyst that I'm meeting regularly with to look at how we might begin to enhance our data availability. And in addition, of course, the Care Act, the Social Care Reform Act that's coming into play in 2023, 24, 25 will require us to effectively treat self-funding clients and people in almost exactly the same way as we do as council funded. So we do have to do this, whether we want to or not. And I actually say, of course we do. It's proven difficult, but we have to do this now. And of course I support and applaud that. And we have our first meeting of how we might begin to move towards the social care reform next week, actually. So there'll be a working group set up to advance that piece of legislation. And part of that will be gathering richer and more intelligence from the community on self-funders to ensure that we make an informed decision of all of the cohort of people that may come into contact with social care, be it council funded or non-council funded. Because of course, as people begin the opportunity via the Social Care Reform Act to access the council services effectively, to say, we want you to commission on our behalf, which already exists as a possibility, but isn't taken up by that many people. That will lead us into a different world. And of course, when self-funders represent 65% of the people that require care in a county, is a world that we will enter with really rich intelligence, because otherwise that will be a difficult area. So absolutely, Councillor. But it's early days again, and that's not fudging the question. It's simply just being honest. It's an early point of the journey.
Yeah, no, I think it was, it was quite correctly identified the JSNA as a priority in my view. I think we absolutely do need to get across and get and understand that cohort as best we can. I'm going to just touch on the discharge to assess lines in the report of 1.5 million loss of the discharge to assess from the current level being 2.4, and we're making the assumption that that's going to remain roughly consistent. But are we managing to offset? I know we're working with the trust on CHC. So there should, kind of in my mind, I feel that there should be a balancing act between these various parts, and that it doesn't all fall to us.
Entirely agree, Chair, and the discussion with the NHS colleagues around discharge to assess is forming a key element of the integrated care system, the ICS discussions. And as we've said previously earlier in this meeting, the NHS supporting a £425,000 investment into effectively a frontline social care service in Home First is a huge investment in discharge to assess that didn't exist as recently as 4 weeks ago. So we are beginning to get into the space with our NHS colleagues about recognition that discharge to assess is not a social care issue, it's a system issue, and an investment in Home First, an investment in discharge to assess is to the benefit of both the NHS and the local authority. You'll be aware, I hope, that we already have an integrated discharge team that is jointly supported within the hospital, but those individuals work jointly for both the authority and for the NHS, and they are line managed by an individual who is jointly funded. So we're moving into that space of joint collaborative approaches to these areas. In addition to that, we are in discussions as we speak because of the current pressure within the NHS. We've recently recommissioned some designated beds for discharge to assess, and we are monitoring delays within hospital on a daily basis and ensuring that we work with our colleagues to make sure that that's kept to a minimum, because, as we said earlier, we don't want people in hospital who don't need to be there.
No.
But I do believe that discharge to assess will become a joint integrated care, intermediate care system very quickly, because
that's what we need to see.
Absolutely.
I think, yeah, it still feels a little bit like, push me, pull you going on. And again, this is another area where home share, were we to do it, would be of enormous benefit. So just finally, I would like to touch on the consultation responses, and I wonder sometimes if the reason we don't always get a lot of responses is because people who respond think, oh, they won't listen, they're not interested, what's the point? So I'm going to make a point of picking up on consultation responses, but specifically and particularly in relation to the all ages commissioning that we were talking about earlier, but specifically the responses from our care leavers, who I thought made a number of very clear and well thought out points with specific asks that were both modest and achievable and practical and sensible. So, without wishing to put you too much horrendously on the spot, how many of those specific asks will we be able to look at and take forward?
It's a slightly difficult question, Council, but I'm just trying to locate the page where those are laid out. I apologise.
I mean, some of it is a little bit broader than other bits of it, to be fair, but some of it is kind of very straightforward stuff, like a support service along the lines of the Reese Foundation, which I have to confess I'm not familiar with, which provides funds for beds, white goods, and paid rent arrears and things of that nature, which clearly would have a very, very direct impact on the health and well-being of our care leavers, for whom I feel we still have a responsibility, and that actually maybe we could get very clever and start to join the dots between such a modest ask and the fact that our household recycling centres are filled to the brim with fridges and white goods and stuff that we might usefully find an onward life for.
Yeah, councillors, I've located the list, so it's on page 43 of the pack if councillors wish to refer to that page. Some of these, to some extent or not, are already done, but of course, as the feedback from care leavers is very, very specific, and there's quite a lengthy list there, which is all very welcome. I believe that part of this budget consultation should take those back. Of course, many of these areas are not within the budget that we're discussing today. They're in the children and young people budget. But
absolutely, I was trying to pick out things that are care leavers as opposed to care, simply in-care care experience.
We're of course moving into all age commissioning, as you rightly point out. So emergency accommodation for placing young people in overnight accommodation with drug, alcohol misusers. Agree, absolutely. It's not an appropriate place for care leavers or young people to be placed in. And so we should avoid that, and hopefully we already do, but we should look into that. Practical support, again, huge fan of practical skills, cooking, laundry, how to manage money, how to access employment and housing, etc. All things that we do and should do very intensively with the third sector to ensure that we support care leavers as much as we possibly can. White goods, I believe, again, we provide those where appropriate, and beds is a particular issue. I know that beds is always difficult, and there is a supply chain that exists across many parts of the country where people can donate beds because bed poverty is a growing issue, and certainly something that we can fairly rapidly address, I would have hoped, because people do donate beds and we can get them to the right place to support the people that need them. Respite care for families, we again do have an extensive respite service, but of course we can always do more. It's difficult for me to say for each one of these what we could and what we do.
Could I just, rather than sort of try to do it on the hoof now, as it were, if you would reflect upon that at some point and then come back, because as a corporate parent I'd be really interested to know anyway, and I think it would demonstrate that it's not a waste of effort to reply to a consultation on the budget.
Absolutely not. And of course, the voice of the child is got to be front and centre in that commissioning approach.
That'd be very kind. Thank you. Mr. Lovegrove.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to come in on that because you mentioned there were comments from consultees about the arrangements for
dog.
Yeah, about rent arrears and those type of things. We have a discretionary housing payment grant scheme that's available for people to access if they need help with those type of areas. So if anybody's listening to this meeting and they have those problems, then get in touch. The Refs and Bens team run the discretionary housing payment grant scheme, and it's there to cover things like rent arrears, costs of moving. It could sometimes extend to white goods and the like. So we do have a mechanism.
Brilliant. Okay, so so if anyone's listening to this meeting and they have got an issue with that, please get in touch. That's fabulous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Lovegrove. All right. Does anyone got any other comments or questions? Okay, so I see we do have Christine Price, so she's off camera at the moment. I think she might have been dealing with the dog. Health Watch. Maybe I'll come back to Health Watch. Okay. Comments from cabinet members. Councillor Crockett, do you have any comments you'd like to make at this point?
Hi, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think Christine's had to deal with a dog, so she'll be back, no doubt. Well, yes, thanks committee members for all your comments, concerns and questions. It's been quite an interesting afternoon so far. I'll start from the beginning. So Councillor Gandhi, thanks for your observation regarding the, lack of slides, should we say, that confirms all of the budgets for the last 3 quarters. And also the last quarter will be coming up soon, as Mr. Lovegrove noted earlier. So it's an interesting time with any budget setting. But no doubt we can learn from that and possibly get those slides put as an appendix on this presentation. Who was next? Was it Councillor Marsh? I think Councillor Marsh mentioned the consultation results, and also Councillor Swinglehurst, you did. And I think it is disappointing that we didn't get very many results, but it's a difficult one. How do we get more consultation responses? We mention them, I'm sure all of us, at our parish council meetings, so that we make people aware that their comments are being listened to and thought about. So if either of you two have any way of trying to get that into the bigger picture, I'd really welcome it. Councillor Tillett. Talk community, yeah, communication and engagement. This is something that we're always banging on about. And to be honest, the Talk Community programme has gone from strength to strength, and we all recognise that. And without that innovation, I think we'd be in a very difficult position in adults and communities. So, again, I don't want to harp on it, but I do thank all those teams that are involved in it. And Councillor Tillett, if you have any ideas how we can communicate better, you know your ward members, if there's any way we can get out there to them, whether it be taking a leaflet round to put through doors, I'd be happy to do that. So I think if you would be happy, I would ask Amy, yourself and I to have a catch up and see if we can do anything along those lines. That would be really helpful. Councillor Summers, you mentioned all ages commissioning and mental health services. I think you completely hit it on the head. We've got huge mental health concerns in the county, probably in the country actually, following this unprecedented time. And we've got really good partners that are going from strength to strength in that area. So, working with NHS, the Hereford and Worcester NHS Trust for Mental Health Services, we are really supporting that. And if we had more money that we could put in, we would. But, there are many partners in this journey, and we'll get there, I'm sure. have I covered everybody who asked a question? I think I have. I'd just like to thank, Section 151 officers, Chief Finance Officer, Councillor Harvey for her steering of this budget. Obviously, Mr. Smith and the Adults and Communities team. Again, they've done a sterling job using the strengths-based models, continually assessing and reviewing social care packages, and the effect of Talk Community has actually got us to where we are today. So I thank you all for your questions, and we'll see what happens next month. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Crockett. I see we have Christine Price back from dealing with her dog. Do you have any comments that you'd like to make at this point, Christine?
No, nothing, thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. And so I'll go now to Councillor Harvey for any comments that she might like to make at this point. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'd like to thank all the committee members and officers present for their comments and thoughtful consideration. I'd like to apologise to the committee that there isn't more detail there. I think you're right, Councillor Gandy. This is very skimpy compared to the level of information that the committee's been provided with in previous years. I don't know quite what's happened there, but I'd like to apologise that there isn't more there for you to get your teeth into, because I know the committee is enthusiastic to do that, and it is helpful to have it all in one place, albeit that detail in terms of the current budget profile is there in the quarter reports. You can't carry that level of detail with you into a meeting like this. It's helpful to have it all set out in front of you. I'll ask officers to make sure that information is available in the budget pack that goes to general overview and scrutiny, and of course committee members are very welcome to make comments there and attend as councillors in attendance. So if you feel that there's anything that you would have liked to have said here but didn't have the information before you to allow you to do that, then please do attend the general scrutiny meeting, and we'll wrap it all up there. So sincere apologies for that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harvey. Yes, I think it's difficult to know exactly where to set the level of detail, and you're right about getting it all in one place is of enormous benefit, if that's possible. So something
more than this is the level.
Well, yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to during the debate there'll be a number of recommendations that have arisen. Joe, have we got a summary of those?
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, I'll just share my screen.
Fabulous, thank you.
Are you seeing that?
Yep, seeing that. That's great. Can everyone see that?
Please feel free to amend.
Yep.
There was the kind offer from Mr. Smith to get a bit more information on the feedback from service users and share that with the committee.
Oh yeah, levels of satisfaction.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, the levels of satisfaction with the
with the service generally, isn't it?
Just with the service generally.
Yeah. So however he cares to provide that. and also response to the consultation, the specific items on the care leavers consultation, and how that's going to be met.
I believe Paul was going to get more information, or is coming up, on All Ages Commission and how the budgeting for that.
Sorry, Councillor Summers, I didn't get that last one.
Sorry, the All Ages Commission, they're working on the budgeting for that at the moment to see costs involved with that. We should be following up on that, I would believe. Paul was going to look into that, or he said he was working on the figures now.
Yeah, Mr. Smith, can you help us out with that one?
No problem whatsoever, Chair. Absolutely.
Okay.
I think 4 would be a little bit clearer. It was the response to the points raised by care leavers in the budget consultation.
Sorry.
No, that's fine.
The response.
In the budget consultation, that's right.
Okay. Then we, is that everyone broadly content with that? Any more comments or additions or changes? Any concluding thoughts from officers or cabinet members?
Just to thank you from the Directorate, cabinet members, and also scrutiny members for your support in this process. And of course, we welcome the feedback and we welcome the recommendations. So thank you very much for your continuing support.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Councillor Crockett.
Yeah, I just wondered if that last point, Chair, was just specifically for the mental health service.
Councillor Summers, was that specific to mental health services, or was it all ages commissioning?
You're on mute, Councillor Summers.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, but I thought All Ages was mental health. I'm not sure if it's...
No, Councillor, All Ages covers everything
okay,
across the whole spectrum. So we will have a budget for all of the services. Obviously, there'll be a specific budget for mental health, but there will be a budget for all services in that.
Okay, as you know, I'm more interested in mental health, but
Okay.
but we're not going to increase that budget, so not much I can do about that one right now. Thanks.
Do you want to revisit that recommendation, Councillor Summers?
No, I'm comfortable with what we've got there now. It's, you know, we have to decide sooner or later whether we're going to increase mental health, spending on mental health. And I'm just concerned that with the All Ages Commission, that there will be an added expense, whether we like it or not. So anyway, we'll keep an eye on it. Thanks.
All right. Yeah, that's fine. I'm good with that. Thank you. Thanks, Joe. Okay, good. So thank you all for that piece of our work this afternoon. I'm just going to add in a point of information here. Oh, Councillor Marsh.
It may be exactly the same point of information that
Well,
you're about to raise. Would this be
I'm
about
just going to mention about the task and finish.
Brilliant.
And update.
Yes, no, over to you.
Okay, so I'm just updating everybody on where we're at with the proposed task and finish on the health impacts of the intensive poultry industry. So we have now got the required number of members, 2 committee members, 2 non-committee members, Councillor Norman, Councillor Shaw, Councillor Marsh, Councillor Summers, and I'm indebted and grateful to all of them for stepping up to do this piece of work. We've already agreed the scoping in terms of reference, so that's good, and therefore the work can begin. The next meeting, which we're having in March, and this is due to the nature of this meeting because of the pandemic, we will then formally recognise those members as being members on that task and finish. So, but this is the informal notification that that's what we're doing, and so that can proceed. And again, I thank those members for volunteering. And right, so that just leaves the date of the next meeting. Oh, Councillor Marsh, you have your hand up there?
I was just going to say one other reason why it would be tremendously helpful for the task and finish group to get going is that I understand that a planning consultation is underway under Councillor Harvey, and any chance that which would allow the recommendations of the task and finish group to possibly feed into other planning documents, it seems that would be a positive. So it's great that the group can start from now.
Absolutely. We don't, we want to kind of crack on with this. We don't want it to go on for months and months now that we've got councillors who are prepared to do the work. So it's all go, which is brilliant. So right, date for the next meeting, 7th of March at 2:30. And I'm formally closing this meeting. And can we switch the live stream off now? Thank you.